Some ancient cities disappeared without leaving a single farewell. Some kingdoms ruled entire regions, then slipped into silence so completely that even their capitals remain uncertain. In other places, archaeologists uncovered meals left unfinished, temples abandoned without struggle, and artifacts whose meanings have been lost for thousands of years. These are not legends or myths. They are real mysteries preserved in stone, buried beneath desert sands, and still challenging everything we think we know about the ancient world. The mysterious fortress of Hassan Lu's final feast, Iran. Imagine walking into a room where time simply stopped. Not slowed down, not faded away. Completely stopped. A meal remains untouched. Everyday objects still rest where their owners left them. The walls are blackened by an ancient fire, and the silence feels almost unnatural. It is as though the people who lived there expected to return in just a few minutes, but they never did. For nearly 3,000 years, this haunting scene remained hidden beneath layers of earth in what is now northwestern Iran. When archaeologists finally uncovered the ancient fortress of Hassan Lu, they were not simply excavating another ruined city. They were opening a frozen chapter of history, one that appeared to capture the final moments of an entire community. Unlike many archaeological sites where centuries of rebuilding erased traces of the past, Hassan Lu offered something extraordinarily rare. It preserved an instant in time. That is why the site continues to fascinate historians today. The greatest mystery is not that the fortress was destroyed. Ancient cities rose and fell throughout history. The true mystery lies in the remarkable silence surrounding its final hours. What happened inside Hassan Lu during its last day? Who were the people sharing what appears to have been an ordinary meal? And why did everything end so suddenly that their daily lives remained exactly where they had left them? These questions have no complete answers. Hassan Lu stood within an important region that connected powerful civilizations across the ancient Near East. Surrounded by fertile plains and strategic trade routes, the fortress occupied a position that brought both prosperity and danger. Its walls protected homes, workshops, storage rooms, and public spaces where generations lived ordinary lives. Children likely played within its streets. Craftsmen shaped metal and pottery. Farmers carried grain through its gates. Merchants arrived with goods from distant lands. Life inside the fortress probably followed familiar rhythms that changed little from season to season. Morning work, afternoon trade, evening meals shared with family. Nothing about those routines would have suggested that history was quietly approaching its final page. Archaeological evidence indicates that Hassan Lu met its end during the 9th century BC. Fire swept through the settlement with tremendous force. Buildings collapsed. Roofs gave way. Wooden beams burned intensely before crashing onto the rooms below. Yet the destruction itself tells only part of the story. The true fascination begins after the flames. As archaeologists carefully uncovered each layer of debris, they noticed something deeply unusual. Many objects remained exactly where people had last used them. Storage jars still stood upright. Household tools rested on floors. Pottery remained inside homes instead of being scattered by centuries of occupation. These details suggested that the city's destruction happened quickly enough to interrupt everyday life before possessions could be gathered or removed. Among the discoveries, one scene became especially unforgettable. Inside one structure, archaeologists found evidence that appeared to preserve the final moments of a shared meal. The arrangement immediately captured attention because it felt so familiar. Nothing about it resembled a ceremonial display or carefully prepared burial. Instead, it reflected something ordinary. People had simply been eating. Whether they were family members, neighbors, travelers, or officials remains uncertain. The archaeological record cannot identify their names or relationships, but the quiet normality of the moment makes the discovery unusually powerful. History often tells stories through kings, battles, and monuments. Hassan Lu tells its story through ordinary people. That difference changes everything. Standing inside those ruins today, it becomes surprisingly easy to imagine conversations that were suddenly interrupted. Perhaps someone had just poured another drink. Perhaps another person had only begun speaking. Perhaps children were nearby while adults discussed the coming harvest or recent travelers. No written record survives to describe what those final conversations sounded like. Only the silent arrangement of objects remains. That silence invites endless reflection. Archaeologists are trained to avoid filling historical gaps with imagination. Instead, they rely on physical evidence. At Hassanlu, the evidence clearly demonstrates sudden destruction by fire. Beyond that, certainty begins to fade. Some researchers have explored whether military conflict played a role. Others examine broader regional instability affecting neighboring powers during the period. The fortress occupied valuable territory, making it vulnerable whenever larger political struggles reached the region. Yet no surviving written account provides a complete description of Hassanlu's final hours. No ancient historian recorded the event in detail. No royal inscription explains exactly who attacked. No preserved archive reveals the decisions made within the fortress before disaster arrived. This absence of written testimony transforms an archaeological site into a historical puzzle. Each burned wall becomes a clue. Every broken vessel raises another question. Even the smallest household object contributes to the search for answers. Excavation at Hassanlu required extraordinary patience. Rather than rushing toward dramatic discoveries, archaeologists documented every layer of debris with remarkable care. Each room offered new information about daily life before destruction. Metal objects revealed advanced craftsmanship. Ceramic vessels reflected local traditions, while also hinting at regional connections. Architectural remains demonstrated careful planning within the fortified settlement. Together, these discoveries painted a picture of a thriving community rather than an isolated outpost. Hassanlu participated in wider cultural networks stretching across the ancient Near East. Trade likely introduced new materials, artistic styles, and practical technologies. Ideas moved alongside merchants. Communities influenced one another through generations of contact. The fortress was not standing outside history. It stood directly within it. That makes its sudden disappearance even more compelling. Civilizations rarely vanish overnight. Most decline gradually through economic problems, political instability, environmental challenges, or changing trade routes. Hassanlu appears different. Its archaeological remains preserve a dramatic interruption instead of a slow fading away. That frozen moment explains why the site continues attracting attention decades after its excavation. Many archaeological discoveries reveal how ancient people lived. Far fewer reveal how ordinary moments ended. The burned structures preserve more than architecture. They preserve atmosphere. One can almost sense the confusion created when routine suddenly gave way to crisis. Yet even here, careful historical responsibility remains essential. The archaeological evidence does not allow historians to reconstruct every event minute by minute. We cannot identify every person inside the fortress. We cannot confidently describe each decision they made. We cannot determine exactly how long the destruction lasted. Those uncertainties remain part of the mystery itself. Ironically, they may also be why Hassanlu continues to resonate so strongly. Modern audiences often expect history to provide clear conclusions. Hassanlu offers something different. It reminds us that the past is often incomplete. Entire lives unfolded beyond the reach of surviving records. Countless names disappeared without inscriptions. Families lived, worked, celebrated, and worried just as people do today, yet history preserved only fragments of their existence. Those fragments carry remarkable emotional weight. A shared meal, a burned room, household objects left behind. These simple discoveries bridge thousands of years more effectively than grand monuments ever could. They remind us that history is not only the story of rulers and empires. It is also the story of ordinary people whose lives ended before they had any reason to believe they would be remembered. Today, the ruins of Hassanlu remain one of archaeology's most haunting reminders that history sometimes survives, not through written words, but through silence. The fortress no longer echoes with conversation. Its gates welcome no merchants. Its homes shelter no families. Instead, the burned stones quietly preserve one extraordinary question: what truly happened during Hassanlu's final feast? After nearly 3,000 years, the evidence still speaks, but only in whispers. The lost maritime kingdom of Wallachia, Cyprus. Long before the rise of the great classical civilizations, one island stood at the center of an international world connected by ships, trade, diplomacy, and wealth. Its rulers exchanged messages with powerful kings. Its merchants supplied one of the ancient world's most valuable resources. Its harbors welcomed vessels arriving from distant kingdoms across the eastern Mediterranean. For centuries, Alatia was not a forgotten place. It was one of the most important maritime powers of the Bronze Age. And then, almost without explanation, it disappeared. Today, historians know the name Alatia from ancient diplomatic records and international correspondence. Yet one remarkable mystery remains unsolved. Where exactly was this kingdom? How could a state important enough to negotiate with the greatest empires of its age leave behind so few clear traces of its own identity? Unlike many ancient kingdoms that survive through monuments, royal inscriptions, and dynastic records, Alatia exists mostly as a shadow. Its influence is undeniable. Its voice, however, has almost completely vanished. That silence has transformed Alatia into one of archaeology's most fascinating puzzles. Thousands of years ago, the eastern Mediterranean was far more interconnected than many people imagine. Merchant ships crossed the sea carrying luxury goods, raw materials, precious metals, pottery, textiles, and diplomatic gifts. Kings communicated across enormous distances through carefully written letters. Political alliances stretched from Egypt to Anatolia, from the Levant to the islands scattered across the Mediterranean. Within this complex international network, Alatia occupied an unusually important position. The kingdom became closely associated with copper, one of the essential resources of the Bronze Age. Without copper, bronze production could not flourish. Weapons, farming tools, ceremonial objects, and everyday equipment all depended upon reliable supplies of this valuable metal. Because of this, Alatia became far more than a simple island kingdom. It became an economic partner whose resources affected entire civilizations. Ancient correspondence reveals that its rulers communicated directly with some of the most powerful kingdoms of the age. These exchanges were not casual conversations. They reflected diplomacy between recognized equals. Gifts were exchanged. Trade agreements were maintained. Political relationships required careful negotiation. This tells historians something remarkable. Alatia was respected. It possessed influence. Its leaders were treated as significant participants in the international world of a late Bronze Age. Yet despite this importance, one extraordinary problem remains. The kingdom's royal archives have not survived in the way historians would hope. Many ancient civilizations left behind thousands of inscriptions explaining their rulers, victories, beliefs, and administration. Alatia did not. Instead, historians often learn about the kingdom through documents written by others. Egyptian records mention it. Near Eastern correspondence refers to it. Diplomatic letters acknowledge its existence. But Alatia rarely speaks entirely in its own voice. It is introduced through conversations with neighboring powers. This creates an unusual historical imbalance. Imagine trying to understand an entire nation only by reading letters sent to it. You would know it mattered. You would recognize its importance. But many details about its people, government, and daily life would remain frustratingly incomplete. That is exactly the challenge facing modern historians. For decades, archaeologists have searched Cyprus for evidence capable of identifying the true political heart of Alatia. Numerous Bronze Age settlements have been studied. Ancient ports have been excavated. Industrial areas connected with copper production have revealed enormous amounts of archaeological material. Each discovery strengthens the connection between Cyprus and the mysterious kingdom. Yet identifying one definitive royal capital has proven far more difficult. Several locations have been proposed. Each offers compelling evidence. Each also raises new questions. Some sites reveal impressive architecture. Others demonstrate extensive metal production. Still others contain evidence of international trade. None has completely resolved the mystery. As a result, Alatia continues to occupy an unusual position within ancient history. Its kingdom almost certainly existed. Its influence is well documented. Its exact political center remains debated. That uncertainty makes every archaeological discovery especially valuable. Excavations across Cyprus have uncovered workshops where copper was processed on an impressive scale. Massive quantities of slag, furnaces, tools, and industrial remains reveal an economy deeply connected to metallurgy. These discoveries explain why foreign rulers valued relationships with Alatia. Copper was more than a commercial product. It represented military strength, economic prosperity, technological advancement. Control over such a resource provided enormous strategic importance throughout the Bronze Age. The sea itself also played a central role. Unlike kingdoms surrounded by mountains or deserts, Alashia depended upon maritime connections. Ships carried its resources outward while bringing foreign goods inward. Harbors served as gateways linking distant civilizations. Merchants likely arrived speaking different languages. Cargoes from multiple regions filled busy waterfronts. Ideas, artistic traditions, and technologies probably moved alongside commercial exchange. Life within these ports must have been remarkably cosmopolitan for the period. Archaeological discoveries support this impression. Imported pottery appears beside locally produced ceramics. Luxury goods demonstrate far-reaching contacts. Craftsmanship reflects influences arriving from multiple cultural traditions. Rather than existing in isolation, Alashia participated actively in an international world connected by the Mediterranean Sea. Then something changed. The late Bronze Age witnessed widespread political instability, affecting numerous kingdoms across the eastern Mediterranean. Trade networks weakened. Powerful states struggled. Long-established systems of diplomacy gradually broke apart. Within this broader transformation, Alashia also faded from history. The exact sequence of events remains uncertain. The surviving evidence does not describe one dramatic final battle. No preserved royal chronicle explains the kingdom's last years. Instead, historians encounter something much quieter. The references become fewer. The political voice grows weaker. Eventually, the kingdom disappears from historical records. Its silence becomes complete. This gradual fading makes the mystery especially compelling. Many ancient cities ended through visible destruction, collapsed walls, burned buildings, abandoned streets. Alashia's disappearance appears far less dramatic. Its historical identity simply dissolves into uncertainty. That absence has encouraged generations of research. Modern scientific techniques continue contributing new information. Chemical analysis of copper artifacts helps researchers trace ancient trade routes. Archaeological excavations reveal additional industrial centers. Environmental studies improve understanding of Bronze Age landscapes. Every new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle. Yet none has produced a final answer. Perhaps that reflects the complexity of the ancient Mediterranean itself. Political centers shifted. Trade evolved. Kingdoms adapted over generations. Historical identities rarely remain fixed forever. Alashia may have changed gradually before eventually disappearing within larger regional transformations. Or perhaps its political structure differed from what historians traditionally expect. The evidence simply remains too incomplete to say with confidence. That uncertainty is not a weakness. It is an honest reflection of responsible historical research. Archaeology does not always produce complete stories. Sometimes it reveals remarkable civilizations while leaving essential questions unanswered. Alashia represents exactly that kind of mystery. Its ships once crossed the Mediterranean. Its copper supported entire economies. Its rulers exchanged messages with kings whose names still appear in history books. Yet the kingdom itself remains strangely elusive. The island remembers. The ancient mines remain. Harbors still overlook the sea where Bronze Age merchants once sailed. Fragments of pottery, industrial workshops, and scattered settlements continue speaking quietly across thousands of years, but they stop just short of revealing everything. Perhaps future excavations will uncover new royal inscriptions. Perhaps another archive still waits beneath the soil of Cyprus. Perhaps one forgotten building contains documents capable of answering questions historians have debated for generations. Until then, Alashia remains exactly what makes archaeology so captivating. A kingdom that shaped the ancient Mediterranean, a maritime power respected by empires, and one of history's greatest civilizations, whose true story still lies hidden somewhere between the sea, the copper mines, and the silent ruins that continue waiting beneath the island's earth. The lost kingdom of Tar-Huntasa, Anatolia. Some ancient cities are remembered because their ruins still dominate the landscape. Others survive through royal inscriptions carved into stone. But a few exist in a far stranger way. They appear repeatedly throughout history, influence the course of powerful civilizations, and then somehow lose the very thing that should have preserved them forever. Their location. Tarhuntassa is one of those places. For centuries, it was important enough to become a major political center in ancient Anatolia. Kings referred to it. Diplomatic records acknowledged it. Its name appeared within the affairs of one of the ancient world's greatest powers. Yet despite all of that, no one can say with complete certainty exactly where Tarhuntassa once stood. How does an entire kingdom disappear while its name survives? How can historians know a city existed but continue debating the ground beneath its foundations? These questions have made Tarhuntassa one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. Unlike legendary lost cities that exist mainly in folklore, Tarhuntassa belongs firmly within documented history. Ancient records mention it repeatedly. Its rulers participated in political affairs that shaped the Late Bronze Age. The kingdom mattered. Its influence extended beyond its own borders. Yet the landscape itself has refused to reveal its greatest secret. Modern Turkey contains countless archaeological sites stretching across mountains, valleys, rivers, and broad plains. Many have been excavated for decades. Entire ancient cities have emerged from beneath the earth. Temples, palaces, defensive walls, and royal archives have transformed our understanding of Anatolian history. Still, Tarhuntassa remains remarkably elusive. Several locations have been proposed. Each offers intriguing clues. Each also leaves important questions unanswered. That uncertainty has fueled generations of archaeological investigation. The story begins during the height of the Hittite world. The Hittite Empire governed an enormous territory connected through administrative centers, provincial kingdoms, military strongholds, and carefully maintained political alliances. Communication across such a vast landscape required organization. Cities served different purposes. Some controlled trade, others guarded important routes. Certain locations became centers of royal administration. Tarhuntassa emerged as one of these significant places. Historical documents indicate that it held considerable political importance. It was not an isolated settlement hidden in the countryside. It functioned within the highest levels of government. Its rulers participated in decisions affecting the wider kingdom. That status makes its disappearance especially remarkable. Ordinarily, cities of such importance leave substantial archaeological footprints: royal palaces, administrative buildings, official archives, monumental inscriptions, large urban populations. Yet Tarhuntassa has remained frustratingly difficult to identify with certainty. Ancient texts describe the kingdom, but they rarely provide the precise geographical information modern researchers need. Instead, historians must piece together scattered references spread across numerous documents. Each clue narrows possibilities. None solves the mystery entirely. This challenge demonstrates one of archaeology's greatest difficulties. Ancient people rarely wrote for future historians. They recorded information meaningful to their own world. Everyone living within the Hittite Empire already understood where Tarhuntassa was located. There was no reason to explain it. Thousands of years later, that missing explanation has become one of the biggest obstacles facing researchers. Landscape itself complicates the search. Anatolia contains rugged mountain ranges, fertile plains, winding rivers, and changing environments shaped by thousands of years of natural processes. Ancient roads disappeared, settlements shifted, earthquakes altered terrain. Later civilizations constructed new towns over older foundations. Agricultural activity transformed countless archaeological sites. Every generation added another layer between the modern world and the Bronze Age. Because of this, locating one forgotten capital becomes far more difficult than simply finding ruins. Researchers combine archaeology with geography, historical texts, environmental studies, and satellite imagery. Every discipline contributes another piece of evidence. Some proposed locations reveal impressive Bronze Age remains. Others match descriptions preserved within Hittite documents. Still others occupy strategic positions consistent with ancient political geography. Yet every candidate presents problems. One location may possess the correct size, but lack expected inscriptions. Another may contain monumental architecture while conflicting with historical descriptions. A third may fit geographical clues yet provide insufficient archaeological evidence. Rather than producing certainty, each discovery often creates additional questions. That is the nature of historical investigation. progress rarely moves in straight lines. Excavations across central and southern Anatolia continue uncovering remarkable settlements connected with Hittite civilization. Massive defensive walls, temple complexes, storage facilities, administrative buildings, clay tablets covered with cuneiform writing. These discoveries demonstrate the sophistication of the ancient political system. Tarhantasa almost certainly shared many of these characteristics. It likely contained officials responsible for administration, scribes recording government decisions, religious buildings dedicated to important deities, craftsmen producing goods for local communities, merchants traveling between neighboring kingdoms, families raising children beneath city walls whose exact location has now been forgotten. This human dimension often disappears behind historical debates. Tarnasa was not merely a point on a map, it was home. People celebrated festivals there, markets filled with conversation, children learned local traditions, farmers supplied surrounding communities. Daily life unfolded just as naturally as in any other thriving Bronze Age city, yet none of those ordinary moments survived in written memory, only scattered references remained. The kingdom itself gradually slipped into historical silence. Its ultimate fate also remains uncertain. The summary of surviving evidence suggests that both its exact location and final history continue to be debated. That distinction matters. Responsible archaeology recognizes uncertainty instead of replacing it with speculation. Many historical mysteries become surrounded by dramatic theories unsupported by evidence. Tarhantasa deserves better. Its mystery is compelling precisely because researchers acknowledge what remains unknown. This careful approach allows every new excavation to contribute genuine knowledge rather than predetermined conclusions. Modern technology continues improving the search. High-resolution satellite imagery reveals ancient settlement patterns invisible from ground level. Remote sensing identifies buried architectural remains. Geographical modeling reconstructs ancient travel routes. Environmental research helps historians understand how landscapes changed over thousands of years. Combined with traditional excavation, these methods steadily improve our understanding of Bronze Age Anatolia. Even so, Tarhantasa continues resisting certainty. Perhaps the city still lies beneath an unexplored mound. Perhaps later construction concealed its most important buildings. Perhaps future excavations will uncover royal inscriptions identifying the site beyond all doubt. History has surprised archaeologists many times before. Entire civilizations once believed lost have reappeared through patient research. Tarhantasa may eventually join them. Until then, it occupies a unique place within ancient history. It is both known and unknown, remembered but unseen, documented yet undiscovered. Its name survives across thousands of years while the city itself remains hidden somewhere within the vast landscapes of Anatolia. That paradox captures the true beauty of archaeology. Every ancient text offers clues. Every excavation raises possibilities. Every unanswered question reminds us how much of humanity's past still waits beneath the earth. Some mysteries endure not because history forgot them, but because history preserved only enough information to ensure they would never be completely forgotten. Tarhantasa stands as one of those rare places. A kingdom acknowledged by powerful rulers, a city important enough to shape political history, and a lost capital whose greatest secret is not what happened there, but where it has been hiding all along. The strange human sacrifices at Sonoli, India. Sometimes the greatest archaeological mysteries are not found inside towering pyramids or abandoned palaces. Sometimes they emerge quietly from an ordinary field. A farmer begins digging. Construction work uncovers unusual objects beneath the soil. Archaeologists arrive expecting another routine excavation. Instead, they uncover discoveries that challenge long-held assumptions about an entire civilization. That is exactly what happened at Sonali. Located in northern India, the site appeared unremarkable for thousands of years. Nothing on the surface suggested that beneath the farmland lay an ancient burial ground containing carefully arranged graves, remarkable artifacts, and burial customs unlike anything researchers expected. As excavation continued, each discovery seemed to raise another question. Who were the people buried here? What beliefs guided their funeral traditions? And why do some of the burials suggest practices that remain difficult to explain with complete certainty? The mystery of Sonali is not built upon sensational claims. It rests upon something far more compelling: the archaeological evidence itself. Unlike legendary stories passed through generations, Sonali presents historians with physical remains preserved beneath the earth. Every grave, every artifact, every carefully positioned object contributes another clue. Yet those clues refuse to form one simple explanation. That uncertainty has transformed Sonali into one of the most intriguing archaeological discoveries in South Asia. The burial ground first attracted widespread attention after systematic excavations revealed numerous ancient graves arranged with remarkable care. Each burial reflected deliberate planning rather than random placement. The deceased had not simply been laid to rest. Ceremonies had almost certainly accompanied these burials. Objects placed beside the individuals suggest that death itself formed part of a larger cultural tradition, whose complete meaning has now been lost. Archaeology often provides remarkable detail about how people lived. Understanding what they believed, however, is considerably more difficult. Beliefs rarely survive unless they were written down. When written records disappear, researchers must interpret silent evidence left inside graves. That is exactly the challenge facing historians at Sonali. Among the discoveries were carefully constructed burial chambers containing pottery, ornaments, weapons, and other grave goods arranged with obvious intention. Nothing appeared accidental. Everything reflected ritual. Everything suggested that those responsible for the burials followed established customs understood by their own community. Yet modern researchers can only reconstruct those customs through material evidence. The people themselves left no surviving explanation. One aspect of the excavation generated particular attention. Certain archaeological findings raise questions regarding unusual burial practices that some researchers have carefully examined in relation to possible ritual activity. Responsible scholarship approaches this evidence with caution. The discoveries invite discussion. They do not provide absolute certainty. This distinction is essential. Archaeology is not simply about finding remarkable objects. It is about interpreting them responsibly. When evidence remains incomplete, historians resist presenting possibilities as confirmed fact. Instead, they acknowledge uncertainty while continuing to investigate. That careful balance defines the ongoing study of Sonali. The site belongs to a period when communities across the Indian subcontinent displayed increasing social complexity. Agriculture supported growing populations, craftsmanship continued developing, trade connected neighboring regions. Local traditions evolved through generations. Burial customs reflected cultural identity just as strongly as architecture or pottery styles. Every object placed beside the deceased carried meaning. Unfortunately, that meaning has not survived intact. Modern observers naturally search for familiar explanations, yet ancient societies often understood life, death, memory, and ritual very differently from modern cultures. Practices that appear mysterious today may once have represented ordinary expressions of respect, belief, or social status. Without surviving texts, certainty becomes impossible. Instead, archaeologists examine patterns. They compare one burial with another. They analyze artifact placement. They study construction methods. Gradually, broader cultural pictures begin to emerge. Sonali contributes significantly to that larger picture. Its discoveries reveal a community capable of remarkable craftsmanship. Pottery displays careful workmanship. Metal objects demonstrate technical skill. Burial architecture reflects planning rather than improvisation. These were organized people living within established traditions. The cemetery itself speaks of continuity. Generation after generation returned to the same landscape. Families likely remembered ancestors resting beneath the earth. Ceremonies probably reinforced community identity. The burial ground served not only as a place for the dead, but also as a place connecting the living with memory. That connection becomes especially powerful when viewed through archaeology. Unlike written history, burial sites preserve emotional decisions. Families selected which objects accompanied loved ones. Communities determined burial positions. Ritual specialists oversaw ceremonies whose details are now impossible to recover completely. Each grave therefore represents more than physical remains. It reflects choices made by people experiencing loss thousands of years ago. Those human decisions remain visible even after language disappears. One of Sonali's greatest contributions to archaeology lies in challenging assumptions. Historical understanding constantly evolves as new discoveries emerge. Sites like Sonali remind researchers that ancient societies were often more diverse and culturally sophisticated than previously imagined. Every excavation has the potential to reshape established interpretations. That is why archaeology remains an ongoing conversation, rather than a finished science. Questions continue long after excavation ends. Laboratory analysis provides additional information. Dating techniques refine chronological understanding. Material studies reveal manufacturing methods. Environmental research reconstructs ancient landscapes. Each scientific advance strengthens the evidence while sometimes creating entirely new mysteries. At Sonoli, this process continues today. Researchers examine burial construction. They analyze human remains with great care. Artifacts receive detailed conservation. Comparisons with neighboring archaeological sites help place the discoveries within wider regional history. Even with these efforts, essential questions remain unanswered. Who exactly were the individuals buried here? How were they connected to one another? What ceremonies accompanied these carefully prepared graves? And what beliefs shaped the unusual practices suggested by some of the archaeological evidence? The site refuses simple conclusions. That uncertainty should not be mistaken for failure. Instead, it reflects the honesty of archaeological research. Some mysteries deserve patience. Premature certainty often obscures genuine understanding. Sonali reminds us that history does not always reveal itself completely. Sometimes the earth preserves only fragments. A carefully arranged grave. A beautifully crafted object. A silent cemetery waiting beneath farmland for thousands of years. Those fragments carry extraordinary importance. They remind us that countless civilizations shaped human history without leaving written chronicles. Their voices survive instead through pottery, architecture, tools, ornaments, and burial traditions. Piece by piece, archaeology allows those forgotten communities to speak again, not with complete sentences, not with perfect clarity, but with enough evidence to remind us that their stories still matter. Today, Sonali continues to inspire careful investigation rather than easy answers. Every excavation season adds another layer of understanding. Every scientific study refines the picture, yet the central mystery remains remarkably powerful. What beliefs inspired these extraordinary burials? What rituals unfolded across this ancient cemetery? And how much of that forgotten world still lies hidden beneath the surrounding fields, waiting for future discoveries to reveal another chapter of one of India's most fascinating archaeological mysteries? The missing royal archives of Carchemish history usually survives because someone chose to write it down. Kings recorded victories. Officials documented laws. Scribes filled clay tablets with diplomatic agreements, trade records, royal correspondence, and administrative decisions. Entire civilizations left behind enormous archives that allow historians to reconstruct their stories thousands of years later. But what happens when the archives disappear? That question lies at the heart of one of the ancient world's most intriguing mysteries. The city of Carchemish stood at one of the most important crossroads of the ancient Near East. It controlled strategic routes, linking Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. Merchants crossed its gates, armies marched toward its walls, diplomats negotiated within its palaces. For centuries, Carchemish was not a forgotten frontier settlement. It was a major political and military center whose influence reached far beyond its own borders. Yet, despite this extraordinary importance, historians continue searching for something that should almost certainly exist. Its royal archives. Where are the official records that once governed one of the region's greatest cities? Why have so many of its most vital documents vanished? These missing archives remain one of archaeology's quietest, yet most fascinating mysteries. Unlike dramatic tales of buried treasure or vanished civilizations, this mystery revolves around information itself. Knowledge disappeared, memory was interrupted, history lost its own written voice. Carchemish occupied an exceptional geographical position. Situated near the Euphrates River, it became a natural meeting point between powerful civilizations. Trade routes converged here. Diplomatic envoys arrived from distant kingdoms. Military campaigns frequently passed through the surrounding region. Its location alone guaranteed political importance. Cities in such strategic positions rarely functioned without sophisticated administration. Taxes required records. Trade required agreements. Royal authority depended upon communication. Every major government needed trained scribes capable of preserving official information. Clay tablets filled with cuneiform writing served as the foundation of Bronze Age administration. From palace correspondence to economic inventories, these archives allowed kingdoms to function across enormous territories. That is precisely why Carchemish presents such an unusual puzzle. Archaeologists have uncovered impressive architectural remains. Massive defensive walls reveal the city's strength. Monumental sculptures demonstrate remarkable artistic achievement. Royal inscriptions survive in various forms. The city clearly possessed political significance. Yet the central administrative archives expected from such a major capital remain frustratingly absent. This absence becomes even more striking when compared with neighboring civilizations. Elsewhere across the ancient Near East, enormous collections of clay tablets have transformed historical understanding. Entire royal libraries emerged beneath collapsed palaces. Diplomatic correspondence survived inside government buildings. Economic records preserve details of everyday administration. These discoveries allow historians to reconstruct centuries of political activity with remarkable precision. Carchemish should have produced something similar. Instead, silence remains. Several explanations have been considered over the years. Perhaps the archives were destroyed during later conflicts. Perhaps they were relocated before political upheaval reached the city. Perhaps they remain buried beneath unexplored sections of the archaeological site, or perhaps they simply have not yet been recognized among excavated materials. Each possibility remains plausible. None has been confirmed. That uncertainty continues driving archaeological research. Excavations at Carchemish have nevertheless revealed an extraordinary city. Visitors entering its monumental gates would likely have encountered carefully planned streets, administrative buildings, temples, workshops, and royal structures reflecting centuries of development. Stone reliefs carved with remarkable precision decorated important public spaces. Powerful rulers displayed authority through monumental architecture rather than words alone. These artistic achievements survived where written administration largely disappeared. Ironically, sculptures now tell part of the story once preserved by documents. Walking through Carchemish during its height would have revealed a thriving urban center alive with movement. Merchants unloaded valuable goods arriving by caravan. Craftsmen shaped stone, bronze, and pottery. Officials supervised taxation and trade. Priests maintained religious ceremonies. Scribes almost certainly sat inside administrative offices recording decisions onto fresh clay tablets. Those tablets represented far more than simple paperwork. They preserved the daily operation of an entire kingdom. Each document connected individuals separated by distance and time. Without them, government itself became impossible. That is why their disappearance matters so deeply. The missing archives do not simply represent lost books. They represent missing chapters of history itself. Imagine discovering a modern capital city thousands of years from now, while finding every government building but none of its documents. The streets remain. The monuments survive. Yet every law, treaty, census, and official decision has vanished. Researchers would understand the city's importance while remaining unable to explain countless details of its political life. That is the challenge historians face at Carchemish. Fortunately, archaeology offers more than written evidence alone. Architecture speaks, artifacts communicate, urban planning reveals priorities. Imported goods demonstrate international connections. Excavated workshops reflect economic specialization. Together, these discoveries confirm Carchemish's position as one of the ancient world's major political centers. Its significance is beyond question. Only its administrative voice remains strangely incomplete. Modern archaeological methods continue expanding the search. Ground-penetrating surveys identify buried structures before excavation begins. Satellite imagery reveals hidden patterns beneath the landscape. Digital mapping reconstructs ancient city layouts with remarkable precision. Every new season uncovers additional buildings capable of transforming historical understanding. Perhaps one unexplored palace still protects sealed archive rooms beneath collapsed walls. History has witnessed such discoveries before. Entire libraries remained hidden for thousands of years, until careful excavation revealed them unexpectedly. Because of this, archaeologists approach Carchemish with cautious optimism. The absence of evidence today does not necessarily mean permanent loss. the city may still be keeping its greatest secrets underground. Responsible historical research also recognizes another possibility. Not every archive survives equally. Clay tablets require specific conditions for preservation. Natural disasters, rebuilding, environmental changes, and human activity influence what reaches the modern world. Sometimes preservation depends upon extraordinary coincidence rather than historical importance. Carchemish reminds us of that reality. History is shaped not only by ancient decisions but also by survival itself. What remains visible today represents only a fraction of what once existed. The missing archives therefore symbolize something much larger than one city's lost records. They remind us that the ancient world remains incomplete. Entire conversations between kings may have disappeared forever. Diplomatic agreements influencing generations could remain buried beneath unexplored ground. Names of forgotten officials, economic reports, letters between neighboring kingdoms, all may still exist somewhere beneath the earth, or may have vanished long before archaeology began. Until stronger evidence emerges, Carchemish continues balancing between knowledge and mystery. Its monuments speak loudly. Its missing archives remain silent. That contrast gives the city its extraordinary appeal. It was powerful enough to influence empires, important enough to deserve vast administrative records, yet mysterious enough that historians still search for the documents that should have explained everything. Perhaps one future excavation will uncover a forgotten archive room sealed beneath collapsed stone. Perhaps rows of clay tablets still wait exactly where ancient scribes left them thousands of years ago. Until that day arrives, the missing royal archives of Carchemish remain one of history's greatest reminders that sometimes the most valuable discoveries are not made of gold or stone, but of words that have not yet been found. The strange cult objects of Enkomi, Cyprus. Most archaeological discoveries answer questions. A ruined wall reveals how a city was built. A written inscription identifies a forgotten ruler. A collection of pottery explains how people lived, traded, and traveled. But every so often, archaeologists uncover something that seems to ask more questions than it answers. The ancient city of Enkomi is one of those places. Located on the island of Cyprus, Enkomi was once a thriving Bronze Age settlement connected to powerful kingdoms across the eastern Mediterranean. Ships arrived from distant shores carrying merchants, diplomats, craftsmen, and valuable cargo. Copper flowed through its workshops, linking the city to one of the most important trade networks of the ancient world. Yet among all its remarkable discoveries, two extraordinary artifacts continue to puzzle historians more than any palace or city wall ever could. Today they are known simply as the Horned God and the Ingot God. Their names sound dramatic, but they were not chosen by the people who created them. Those ancient names have been lost, their beliefs have disappeared, their sacred stories have faded into silence. Only the statues remain, and they continue to guard one of archaeology's most fascinating religious mysteries. Unlike civilizations such as Egypt or Mesopotamia, where temples often preserve written prayers, myths, and royal inscriptions, Enkomi offers something very different. Its sacred world survives almost entirely through objects. The statues speak. The written explanations do not. This absence changes everything. Imagine discovering an enormous cathedral thousands of years from now while finding every religious book missing. The architecture would remain. The sculptures would survive. Ceremonial objects would still occupy their places, yet the meaning behind every ritual would have vanished. Future historians could describe what they saw but never fully explain why it mattered. That is precisely the challenge presented by Enkomi. The city itself flourished during the Late Bronze Age, a period when Cyprus occupied an increasingly important position within Mediterranean trade. Its copper resources attracted merchants from powerful neighboring kingdoms. Busy harbors connected Enkomi to distant ports. Imported pottery, luxury goods, and artistic influences arrived alongside commercial exchange. The city prospered through these international relationships. Its streets likely echoed with different languages. Craftsmen worked bronze using techniques refined over generations. Markets displayed goods arriving from across the sea. Religious ceremonies almost certainly formed part of everyday life. But those ceremonies remain among the least understood aspects of Enkomi's civilization. The discovery of the Horned God immediately attracted scholarly attention. The bronze figure stands with remarkable confidence, wearing a distinctive horned headdress unlike anything commonly associated with later Mediterranean religions. Every detail appears intentional: the posture, the clothing, the carefully crafted proportions. Nothing about the figure suggests ordinary decoration. Instead, archaeologists believe it almost certainly held religious significance. Yet beyond that cautious conclusion, certainty disappears. No surviving inscription identifies the figure. No temple text explains its role. No priest recorded the stories associated with this remarkable image. The statue survives, its identity does not. Nearby, another extraordinary artifact deepened the mystery. Known today as the ingot god, this bronze figure stands upon a copper ingot, immediately connecting religion with one of Cyprus's greatest economic resources. At first glance, the symbolism appears obvious. Copper shaped the island's prosperity. The figure may therefore represent divine protection over metallurgy or trade. But archaeology demands greater caution. Appearances alone cannot confirm ancient belief. Without written evidence, interpretation remains limited. The statue raises possibilities. It does not provide certainty. This distinction separates responsible historical research from speculation. The temptation to invent stories is always present. Ancient religious objects naturally invite imagination. Yet the most fascinating aspect of infamy lies precisely in what remains unknown. Its religious world survives without explanation. Every carefully crafted object becomes both evidence and mystery. Excavations throughout Enkomi have revealed temples, workshops, houses, storage buildings, and public spaces demonstrating an organized urban community. The city clearly possessed skilled artisans capable of sophisticated metalworking. Bronze casting required remarkable technical knowledge. Creating statues of such quality demanded experience, precision, and artistic vision. These were not experimental works. They reflected an established tradition. Somebody taught these techniques. Somebody commissioned these sacred objects. Somebody understood exactly what they represented. Only modern researchers remain uncertain. Walking through Enkomi during its height would likely have revealed a city alive with ceremony. Religious festivals may have filled temple courtyards. Offerings were probably presented before sacred images. Priests may have guided rituals understood by every member of the community. Children would have grown up learning traditions that required no written explanation because everyone already knew them. Then history changed. The beliefs disappeared. The language evolved. The temples fell silent. What once seemed perfectly familiar gradually became impossible to interpret. That transformation illustrates one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Material objects often survive far longer than ideas. Stone outlasts memory. Bronze endures after belief fades. As a result, historians frequently recover the physical remains of religion while losing its intellectual foundation. Enkomi represents this phenomenon almost perfectly. Its sacred objects remain astonishingly well preserved. The religious world that created them has largely vanished. Modern scientific analysis continues examining the statues in remarkable detail. Researchers study metal composition to understand manufacturing techniques. Microscopic examination reveals casting methods. Comparisons with neighboring cultures identify artistic influences. Every investigation adds valuable information, yet none answers the central question: who exactly did these figures represent? The broader archaeological context provides additional clues. Enkomi participated actively within an interconnected Mediterranean world. Trade introduced new materials, technologies, and artistic traditions. Religious ideas may also have traveled alongside merchants. The horned god and ingot god could reflect local traditions influenced by international contact, or they may represent uniquely Cypriot beliefs unlike those found elsewhere. Current evidence cannot fully distinguish between these possibilities. That uncertainty continues, inspiring careful research rather than quick conclusions. One of archaeology's greatest strengths lies in accepting incomplete knowledge. Not every mystery requires immediate resolution. Sometimes preserving uncertainty proves more honest than replacing it with unsupported certainty. Enkomi deserves exactly that respect. Its statues continue standing after more than 3,000 years. Their creators succeeded in producing objects capable of surviving entire civilizations. Ironically, those same masterpieces now conceal more than they reveal. Visitors looking upon them often experience the same reaction: admiration first, curiosity second, then the realization that the people who truly understood these sacred figures disappeared long ago. Their ceremonies ended, their prayers faded, their myths were never preserved, only bronze remained. Today, the horned god and the ingot god remain among the most extraordinary religious artifacts of the Bronze Age, not because they are the largest, not because they are the oldest, but because they remind us how easily entire belief systems can vanish while their symbols endure. Somewhere within the silent temples of ancient Nkomi, these figures once held meaning that every worshipper immediately understood. Now they stand quietly inside museums, still watching, still waiting, and still refusing to explain the forgotten religious world that brought them into existence. The vanished kingdom of Mira, Western Anatolia. Some kingdoms disappear because their cities are destroyed. Others vanish after dramatic invasions remembered for generations. But a few simply fade away. Their borders dissolve. Their rulers disappear from history. Their names survive only in scattered diplomatic records, while the people who once lived there gradually become impossible to trace. The kingdom of Mira belongs to this final and deeply mysterious category. During the late Bronze Age, Mira was not an isolated settlement hidden among distant hills. It was an important client kingdom connected to the powerful Hittite Empire. Its rulers participated in regional politics. Its territory occupied valuable land in western Anatolia. Its existence influenced diplomacy, military planning, and relations between neighboring states. Yet today, one question continues to puzzle historians. What actually happened to Mira? How can a kingdom important enough to appear in official records leave behind so little evidence of its final days? Unlike ancient civilizations whose collapse was marked by spectacular ruins or detailed chronicles, Mira seems to disappear almost quietly. Its silence has become its greatest mystery. Ancient Anatolia was a landscape of remarkable diversity. Mountains separated fertile valleys. Trade routes connected inland cities with the Aegean coast. Farmers cultivated rich agricultural lands while merchants carried valuable goods across difficult terrain. Political authority depended not only on military strength, but also on carefully maintained alliances. Within this complicated world, the Hittite Empire governed a network of regional kingdoms rather than a single unified territory. Mira formed part of that political system. Its rulers maintained relationships with Hittite kings. Diplomatic agreements helped preserve stability. Local leaders governed their own territories while recognizing the authority of the larger empire. For generations, this arrangement appears to have functioned successfully. The kingdom prospered within an interconnected political landscape. Its people farmed the valleys, craftsmen worked stone, bronze, and pottery. Officials administered local communities. Religious ceremonies likely followed traditions passed from one generation to another. Children grew up believing their kingdom would continue as it always had. Nothing lasts forever. By the end of the Bronze Age, much of the eastern Mediterranean entered a period of extraordinary change. Political systems weakened, trade routes became increasingly unstable, long-established kingdoms faced growing uncertainty. Entire regional networks that had connected civilizations for centuries began to fracture. Historians often describe this transformation as the Bronze Age collapse. It affected numerous societies across a vast geographical area. Within that broader upheaval, Mira also vanished. The summary preserved by historians tells us something important. The kingdom dissolved during this period of regional collapse, leaving only limited traces of its final years. That wording matters. It suggests gradual disappearance rather than one clearly documented catastrophe. Unlike cities consumed by fire or abandoned after visible destruction, Mira appears to fade from the historical record. References become fewer. Political influence weakens. Eventually, the kingdom disappears altogether. For archaeologists, this creates a uniquely difficult problem. Excavation depends upon physical evidence. Historical reconstruction depends upon written evidence. When both become limited, certainty becomes impossible. Researchers must instead assemble small fragments into a broader picture. Each inscription, each settlement, each artifact contributes another piece of evidence. Yet the complete image remains unfinished. Several archaeological sites across western Anatolia have been proposed as possible centers connected with Mira. Each offers valuable clues. Each also raises new questions. Some reveal impressive late Bronze Age occupation. Others occupy strategically important locations consistent with historical geography. Still others contain material culture reflecting Hittite influence. None has produced definitive proof identifying the kingdom's political heart beyond debate. That uncertainty continues encouraging careful investigation. The landscape itself complicates the mystery. Western Anatolia has witnessed thousands of years of continuous human occupation. New settlements replaced older ones. Agriculture reshaped ancient terrain. Earthquakes altered the environment. Later civilizations constructed towns above Bronze Age remains. Over centuries, countless traces of Mira's existence became buried beneath newer history. Archaeologists must therefore distinguish one period from another with extraordinary precision. Every excavation layer matters. Every fragment of pottery contributes information. Every architectural foundation helps reconstruct forgotten landscapes. This painstaking work rarely produces immediate answers. Instead, understanding develops gradually over decades of research. Despite these challenges, historians know that Mira was more than a name. Its rulers interacted with neighboring kingdoms. Political decisions made within its borders influenced regional affairs. Diplomatic correspondence acknowledged its importance. The kingdom participated in a larger international system connecting Anatolia, the Aegean, and the Eastern Mediterranean. That broader context makes its disappearance even more significant. The fall of Mira reflects something larger than one kingdom's fate. It illustrates how interconnected ancient civilizations truly were. When major political systems weakened, smaller kingdoms often struggled alongside them. Trade became uncertain. Diplomatic protection diminished. Regional stability disappeared. Communities that had flourished for generations suddenly faced entirely new realities. Exactly how the people of Mira experienced these changes remains unknown. Perhaps local leaders attempted to preserve order. Perhaps communities adapted to shifting political circumstances. Perhaps neighboring powers gradually absorbed territory once governed independently. The surviving evidence simply does not allow historians to reconstruct every stage of the process. That absence should not be filled with speculation. Responsible archaeology accepts uncertainty where evidence ends. What remains especially fascinating is the human side of the mystery. History often focuses upon kingdoms as political entities, but kingdoms are ultimately collections of ordinary lives. Families continued planting crops. Artisans continued producing tools. Merchants continued traveling familiar roads. Children continued learning local customs. While governments rose and fell, daily life often persisted, until larger forces gradually reshaped entire societies. The disappearance of Mira therefore represents more than political change. It reflects the quiet transformation of countless individual lives whose names history never recorded. Modern archaeological methods continue improving the search. Satellite imagery identifies buried settlement patterns. Geophysical surveys detect hidden structures without disturbing the ground. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient landscapes altered over millennia. Digital mapping allows researchers to compare historical geography with modern terrain more accurately than ever before. Each technological advance offers new opportunities. Perhaps one future excavation will uncover official inscriptions identifying Mira's capital. Perhaps royal administrative buildings still lie beneath unexplored mounds. History has surprised archaeologists many times before. Entire kingdoms once considered legendary eventually emerged from beneath the earth. Through patient investigation, Mira may yet reveal more of its story. Until then, its silence remains meaningful. Unlike myths created through imagination, Mira represents a documented kingdom whose disappearance reflects genuine historical uncertainty. Its rulers once negotiated with powerful neighbors. Its territory mattered. Its people contributed to one of the ancient world's most interconnected civilizations. Then, gradually, history lost sight of them. Today, only fragments remain. A handful of inscriptions, scattered archaeological discoveries, carefully studied landscapes, and the enduring memory of a kingdom that slowly dissolved during one of history's greatest periods of change. Perhaps that is what makes Mira so compelling, not because it vanished in dramatic fashion, but because it reminds us that civilizations do not always end with thunder. Sometimes they disappear almost silently, leaving behind only enough evidence to prove they once existed, while keeping the story of their final days forever beyond complete explanation. The enigma of the Palisade settlements. Levant. Few mysteries in ancient history begin with an entire people appearing almost without warning. Cities usually grow over centuries. Kingdoms expand gradually. Cultures leave long trails of settlements, monuments, and written records that allow historians to trace their development across generations. The Palisade seemed different. Within a relatively short period, they emerged along the eastern Mediterranean coast, established permanent settlements, and became part of a region already shaped by centuries of powerful civilizations. Yet one question continues to challenge archaeologists. Where did they truly come from? The Palisade are often associated with a wider movement of groups remembered in history as the Sea Peoples. Ancient records acknowledge their arrival, but those records do not provide a complete explanation of their origins. Instead, they leave modern historians with fragments of a much larger story. Who were these newcomers? How did they establish thriving communities so quickly? And why does the archaeological evidence still resist one simple answer? Unlike legends passed through folklore, the mystery of the Palisade is built upon genuine archaeological discoveries. Excavated settlements reveal carefully planned communities. Pottery, architecture, household objects, and everyday tools all demonstrate that people lived, worked, traded, and raised families along this coastline. These were not temporary encampments. They were permanent homes. The challenge lies in understanding how those communities came into existence. The Levant during the Late Bronze Age was already one of the ancient world's most connected regions. Trade routes linked Egypt with Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean islands. Merchant ships crossed the sea carrying copper, timber, textiles, pottery, and luxury goods. Caravans traveled inland through fertile valleys and mountain passes. Cities flourished through international commerce. Political alliances connected neighboring kingdoms. It was into this complicated landscape that the Palisade established themselves. Their settlements quickly became part of an already vibrant world. Archaeological excavations have uncovered impressive remains from several coastal communities traditionally connected with the Palisade. Stone buildings, storage facilities, workshops, defensive structures, and domestic neighborhoods reveal organized urban life. Every discovery reflects planning. Every layer of occupation demonstrates continuity. These communities were not improvised. They developed into stable settlements whose inhabitants adapted successfully to their surroundings. One of the most valuable clues comes from everyday objects. Pottery styles recovered from these settlements display characteristics that attract considerable scholarly attention. Ceramic designs sometimes appear different from those traditionally associated with earlier local populations. Researchers carefully compare shapes, manufacturing techniques, decorative patterns, and firing methods. Each comparison contributes another piece to the larger puzzle. Do these differences reflect newcomers arriving from elsewhere? Or do they represent cultural exchange within an already interconnected Mediterranean world? Current evidence supports continued investigation rather than definitive conclusions. Architecture raises similar questions. Some building traditions appear familiar within the Levant. Others suggest influences that may have arrived through migration or long-distance contact. Ancient societies rarely developed in complete isolation. Merchants carried ideas alongside goods. Craftsmen learned new techniques through interaction with neighboring communities. Cultures constantly borrowed, adapted, and transformed traditions. Because of this, identifying origins through archaeology alone becomes remarkably complex. The story is rarely as simple as one population replacing another. Instead, archaeologists increasingly examine processes of adaptation. Communities evolve, traditions merge, new identities emerge over generations. The Palisade settlements may reflect exactly this kind of cultural transformation. Rather than representing one single event, their appearance may have involved gradual settlement, interaction with existing populations, and the development of new regional identities. This possibility makes the mystery even more fascinating. Historical records acknowledge the Palisade, but they rarely explain everyday life. Archaeology fills part of that gap. Within excavated houses, researchers discover evidence of ordinary families. Cooking vessels remain where meals were once prepared. Grinding stones reveal food production. Storage jars demonstrate long-term planning. tools reflect skilled craftsmanship. Children undoubtedly played within streets now buried beneath centuries of earth. Life continued through familiar routines despite larger political changes unfolding across the eastern Mediterranean. The people themselves remained remarkably human. They worked, they celebrated, they built homes, they adapted to changing circumstances. Their settlements reflect resilience rather than mystery alone. Yet the question of origin continues to dominate discussion. This is partly because the wider Late Bronze Age witnessed enormous regional transformation. Powerful kingdoms struggled, trade networks weakened, political systems changed dramatically. Within that broader environment, movements of people almost certainly occurred. Exactly how the Palisade fit into those developments remains one of archaeology's most carefully studied questions. Responsible historical research avoids presenting uncertainty as established fact. Various interpretations have been proposed over the years. Some emphasize migration, others highlight cultural interaction. Still others suggest more gradual processes of regional change. Each interpretation draws upon archaeological evidence while recognizing its limitations. No single explanation has achieved universal agreement. That ongoing debate reflects the complexity of the ancient world rather than weakness within archaeology itself. Modern scientific methods continue contributing valuable insights. Laboratory analysis examines pottery composition. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient landscapes. Settlement mapping identifies patterns of urban development. Isotopic research and material analysis provide additional perspectives on movement and exchange. Each discipline strengthens historical understanding while reminding researchers that ancient societies rarely fit modern categories. The Palisade settlements demonstrate exactly why archaeology remains such a dynamic field. Every excavation season introduces new evidence. Every carefully documented discovery encourages historians to refine earlier interpretations. Rather than closing debates, new findings often deepen them. That process is not frustrating. It is the essence of responsible scholarship. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by the Palisade concerns identity itself. Ancient communities were not static. People moved, cultures interacted, languages evolved, traditions blended. History unfolded through constant contact between neighboring societies rather than complete isolation. The settlements along the Levantine coast preserve that process in remarkable detail. Stone walls remain standing. Pottery survives beneath the soil. Household objects continue revealing everyday life. Yet the people who created them still guard their greatest secret. Where exactly did their journey begin? Today, visitors looking across these ancient coastal landscapes often see peaceful ruins overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It is difficult to imagine the activity that once filled these settlements. Ships approaching the harbor, merchants unloading cargo, families preparing evening meals, children growing up beside city walls overlooking the sea. Those ordinary moments shaped one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. The Palisade did not leave behind a complete explanation of who they were. Instead, they left communities, artifacts, architecture, fragments of history waiting patiently beneath the earth. And perhaps that is why their story continues to captivate historians. Because every newly uncovered house, every carefully restored vessel, every excavated street, brings us closer to understanding one of the ancient world's most intriguing settlements, while reminding us that some of history's greatest journeys are still waiting to be fully discovered. The mysterious stone circles of Har-Kar-Kam. Some archaeological mysteries are hidden beneath cities. Others remain buried inside forgotten tombs. But a few lie completely exposed beneath the open sky, visible to anyone who walks across the landscape. Their stones have stood in the same place for thousands of years. The wind has passed over them. Generations have come and gone. Entire civilizations have risen and disappeared around them. Yet the people who built these remarkable monuments remain unknown. Har-Kar-Kam is one of those extraordinary places. Located within the harsh desert landscape between the Sinai and the Negev, it appears at first to be little more than an isolated mountain surrounded by endless rock and sand. There are no towering palaces, no massive city walls, no monumental temples dominating the horizon. Instead, the landscape is covered with something far quieter. Stone circles, stone altars, ceremonial structures, rock carvings. ancient pathways connecting one sacred place to another. Together, they create one of the most mysterious ritual landscapes ever discovered. Who built them? Why was this remote mountain so important, and why did its builders eventually disappear without leaving behind a single written explanation? These questions continue to challenge archaeologists today. Unlike many famous archaeological sites connected to known kingdoms, Arkarkom belongs to a world that remains largely anonymous. There are no royal inscriptions identifying its rulers, no preserved archives describing ceremonies, no surviving texts explaining why thousands of people once gathered in this isolated region. Only the landscape itself remains, and it speaks in silence. The mountain dominates the surrounding desert. Rugged cliffs rise above wide valleys carved by thousands of years of wind and seasonal water. Even today, the environment feels remote. Travel across the area requires determination. Resources are limited. Life depends upon careful planning. Yet despite these challenges, ancient people repeatedly return to Har-Karkalm over long periods of time. Archaeological surveys have identified hundreds of ritual features scattered across the mountain and its surrounding slopes. Stone circles appear carefully arranged. Small altars occupy elevated viewpoints. Pathways connect ceremonial locations. Rock art decorates nearby surfaces with images left by people whose identities have long since vanished. Nothing about these discoveries appears accidental. Every structure reflects deliberate construction. Every location seems carefully chosen. The mountain itself appears to have held profound importance. What makes Har-Karkalm especially fascinating is that the evidence suggests repeated ceremonial activity rather than permanent urban settlement. This was not a great city. It was something different. People traveled here, gathered, performed rituals, then departed. Generation after generation appears to have maintained that tradition. Exactly what occurred during these gatherings remains unknown. Archaeologists can identify physical structures. Understanding ancient belief systems is considerably more difficult. Without written records, every interpretation must remain cautious. Stone circles themselves exist throughout many parts of the ancient world. Their meanings vary enormously. Some served ceremonial purposes, others marked important locations. Still others may have organized gatherings connected with seasonal traditions. Har-Karkalm presents an especially complex example because so many ritual features exist together across one landscape. Rather than one isolated monument, researchers encounter an entire sacred environment. This broader context changes how archaeologists approach the site. Instead of asking what one structure represents, they examine how all the features relate to one another. Why are certain altars positioned where they are? Why do pathways connect particular locations? Why do stone circles appear repeatedly across the mountain? Each observation contributes another clue, yet no single answer explains everything. The surrounding desert also plays an important role in understanding the mystery. To modern visitors, the landscape may appear empty. Ancient communities likely experienced it very differently. Mountains often carried symbolic importance. Elevated places naturally became locations for ceremony, observation, and communal gathering. Har-Karkalm may have represented a destination whose significance extended far beyond its immediate surroundings. People may have traveled considerable distances to reach it. Such journeys themselves could have formed part of the ritual experience. The archaeological evidence cannot confirm every detail. It does, however, demonstrate repeated human activity focused upon ceremonial construction rather than ordinary settlement. Excavations and surveys continue, revealing remarkable consistency in the site's organization. Stone features display careful placement. Construction methods reflect planning rather than improvisation. Artifacts associated with ritual activity appear across multiple areas. Together, they suggest that the mountain remained important over extended periods rather than serving one brief historical moment. This continuity makes the later abandonment especially intriguing. Eventually, the ceremony stopped. The pathways fell silent. The stone circles remained exactly where they had always stood, but the communities that once gathered among them no longer returned. The summary preserved by researchers emphasizes an important point. The builders themselves remain unidentified. That uncertainty distinguishes Har-Karkalm from many better-known archaeological sites. Usually, historians can connect monuments with particular kingdoms or cultures. Here, The landscape preserves ritual architecture while withholding the identities of those responsible. The mountain remembers. History does not. Responsible archaeology avoids filling that silence with unsupported stories. Many ancient ceremonial sites naturally inspire speculation. It is tempting to assign definite meanings where evidence remains incomplete. Har deserves greater patience. Its mystery lies not in dramatic legends but in careful observation. The stones are real. The altars are real. The ceremonial landscape unquestionably exists. Only the names and beliefs of its creators have disappeared. Modern technology continues helping researchers understand the site. Satellite imagery maps the distribution of ritual structures across the mountain. Precise surveying records relationships between individual features. Environmental studies reconstruct the ancient landscape, offering insight into how people may have moved through the region. Each scientific method strengthens archaeological understanding while respecting the limits of available evidence. One of the most remarkable aspects of Har is its atmosphere. Visitors often describe the landscape as unusually quiet. Far from modern cities, surrounded by vast desert horizons, the mountain possesses a sense of timelessness difficult to explain. It becomes easier to understand why ancient communities may have regarded the location as special. Even without knowing their beliefs, the physical setting itself encourages reflection. The open sky, the silence, the distant cliffs, the carefully arranged stones. Together they create a place where ceremony feels almost inevitable. Yet archaeology reminds us that atmosphere alone cannot answer historical questions. Only evidence can do that. And at Har the evidence continues, inviting careful study rather than definitive conclusions. Perhaps future discoveries will identify the communities responsible for these remarkable constructions. Perhaps nearby settlements still remain buried beneath desert sediments. Perhaps new analytical techniques will reveal connections previously overlooked. History has often rewarded patience. Until then, Har remains one of the ancient world's most extraordinary sacred landscapes. A mountain covered not with palaces or royal monuments, but with hundreds of silent stone circles and ceremonial structures whose builders have vanished from memory. They left no written prayers, no royal chronicles, no names carved into stone. Only a sacred landscape stretching across the desert, waiting quietly for someone to finally understand the forgotten people who once transformed an isolated mountain into one of history's greatest ritual mysteries. The unidentified kings of early Phoenician Tyre. Some cities are remembered because of the rulers who built them. The names of powerful kings survive through monuments, inscriptions, and royal tombs. Generations later, historians can still follow their reigns, victories, and ambitions with remarkable clarity, but occasionally, history preserves the city while forgetting the people who made it possible. That is the mystery of ancient Tyre. Long before it became one of the Mediterranean's greatest maritime powers, before its ships crossed distant seas and its merchants built trading networks that stretched across the ancient world, Tyre was already growing into an influential coastal city. Its harbors bustled with activity, its craftsmen refined valuable goods, its sailors mastered the unpredictable waters of the Mediterranean. The city flourished. Yet the identities of the earliest rulers who laid the foundations for that success remain largely unknown. Who transformed a coastal settlement into one of history's most remarkable maritime centers? Who organized its ports, protected its trade, and guided its earliest expansion? Surprisingly, history offers very few answers. The city became famous. Its founders almost disappeared. Tyre occupied one of the most advantageous locations along the eastern Mediterranean coast. Its position encouraged maritime trade unlike almost anywhere else in the region. Natural harbors offered protection for ships. Nearby coastal routes connected distant civilizations. Merchants arriving from Egypt, Cyprus, Anatolia, and the Levant could exchange goods, ideas, and technologies within a thriving commercial environment. The sea was not a barrier. It was Tyre's greatest opportunity. Over time, this relationship with the Mediterranean shaped the city's identity. Sailing became more than transportation. It became the foundation of prosperity. Generations of shipbuilders, navigators, merchants, and craftsmen developed skills that eventually made Phoenician civilization famous throughout the ancient world. Yet every great achievement begins somewhere. Someone had to organize the earliest harbor facilities, someone established political authority, someone negotiated with neighboring communities. Those individuals almost certainly existed. Their names simply failed to survive. Unlike many neighboring kingdoms, the earliest history of Tyre contains remarkable gaps. Later traditions celebrate the city's importance, but the first rulers responsible for its initial development remain difficult to identify with confidence. Written evidence from the earliest period is extremely limited. Royal inscriptions expected from such influential leaders have largely disappeared. Administrative records remain scarce. The city's earliest political history survives only in fragments. This creates a fascinating contradiction. Tyre became one of the ancient world's most recognizable maritime powers. Its origins remain strangely anonymous. Archaeology provides valuable insight into the city's growth even when written history falls silent. Excavations reveal evidence of continuous occupation stretching across long periods. Stone foundations, harbor structures, workshops, pottery, and imported goods demonstrate that Tyre participated actively within the wider Mediterranean economy. The city did not suddenly become prosperous. Its development required generations of planning and organization. Every harbor installation reflects deliberate engineering. Every workshop suggests skilled labor. Every imported artifact reveals long-distance connections. These discoveries confirm that capable leadership almost certainly guided the city's early expansion. Unfortunately, archaeology rarely identifies names without accompanying inscriptions. The buildings survive. The rulers do not. Walking through ancient Tyre during its early prosperity would have revealed an extraordinary scene. Ships crowded the harbor carrying timber, metals, ceramics, textiles, and luxury goods. Dock workers unloaded valuable cargo. Merchants negotiated prices in busy marketplaces. Craftsmen shaped wood, stone, bronze, and precious materials inside crowded workshops. The scent of salt water mixed with smoke from industrial activity. Voices speaking different languages echoed through narrow streets connecting warehouses to the waterfront. It was an international city long before globalization became a modern concept. Yet beneath this vibrant activity stood a political system whose earliest architects remain largely invisible. Cities do not organize themselves. Harbors require administration. Trade requires regulation. Diplomatic relationships demand negotiation. Someone governed Tyre during these formative centuries. The archaeological evidence confirms organized urban life. History simply struggles to identify the individuals responsible. This absence becomes even more intriguing when compared with neighboring civilizations. Elsewhere across the ancient Near East, royal monuments proudly celebrated kings and their accomplishments. Palaces displayed inscriptions recording victories. Statues honored rulers by name. Administrative archives documented political decisions in remarkable detail. Tyre's earliest political voice, by contrast, is much quieter. The city itself became the lasting monument. Its founders gradually disappeared behind their own success. One reason for this historical silence may lie in the nature of preservation itself. Ancient records survive unevenly. Climate affects materials differently. Urban rebuilding often destroys earlier construction. Coastal environments introduce additional challenges through erosion, rising sea levels, and continuous occupation across thousands of years. Tyre remained an important city for centuries. Each generation built upon the work of the last. Older structures disappeared beneath newer ones. The earliest layers became increasingly difficult to recover. This makes archaeological investigation exceptionally challenging. Researchers must carefully separate one historical period from another. Every excavation layer represents another chapter in the city's long development. Small discoveries often prove surprisingly significant. Fragments of imported pottery reveal trading partners. Architectural remains demonstrate urban planning. Industrial waste identifies manufacturing activity. Together, these clues gradually reconstruct a picture of early Tyre without fully revealing its political leadership. Modern archaeological methods continue expanding understanding. Digital mapping reconstructs ancient shorelines altered by thousands of years of environmental change. Marine archaeology investigates submerged harbor structures. Material analysis identifies the origins of imported goods. Each scientific advance contributes valuable evidence about the city's early economy and international connections. Even so, the identities of Tyre's earliest kings remain elusive. Perhaps future excavations will uncover forgotten inscriptions buried beneath later construction. Perhaps unexplored sections of the ancient city still conceal administrative buildings or royal monuments capable of transforming historical understanding. Archaeology has repeatedly demonstrated that extraordinary discoveries often emerge from places long believed fully understood. Until such evidence appears, responsible historians acknowledge uncertainty. The absence of names should not diminish the city's achievements. If anything, it enhances appreciation for what survives. Tyre's success is undeniable. Its maritime influence shaped Mediterranean history. Its merchants connected distant civilizations. Its reputation spread across the ancient world. Those accomplishments required leadership of exceptional ability. History remembers the city. It simply forgot many of the people who guided it during its earliest centuries. Perhaps that reflects a larger truth about civilization itself. Countless individuals contribute to history without expecting personal recognition. Their decisions influence generations. Their work transforms societies. Yet their names gradually disappear while their creations endure. Tyre stands as a remarkable example of that reality. Its harbors welcomed the world. Its ships crossed distant seas. Its influence reached kingdoms separated by hundreds of miles. But the earliest rulers who helped make all of this possible remain hidden within history's deepest shadows. Today, the Mediterranean still washes against the ancient coastline where Tyre once flourished. The sea remembers the harbor. The ruins remember the city. Archaeology remembers the civilization. Only the names of its earliest kings remain missing. And perhaps somewhere beneath layers of stone, sand, and centuries of rebuilding, the forgotten records of those first rulers still wait quietly, ready to restore the identities of the men who helped build one of the greatest maritime cities the ancient world would ever know. The disappearance of the Amurru Kingdom, Syria. History remembers great empires because they leave enormous footprints. Their armies carve victories into stone. Their kings build monumental cities. Their monuments dominate landscapes for thousands of years, but between those famous empires existed smaller kingdoms that quietly shaped diplomacy, trade, and regional politics. Many of them influenced history far more than most people realize. One of those forgotten powers was the Kingdom of Amurru. For centuries, Amurru occupied a strategic position within the Bronze Age Near East. Its rulers negotiated with powerful neighbors. Its territory connected important trade routes. Its political choices affected relationships between larger kingdoms competing for influence across Syria and the eastern Mediterranean. Yet despite its importance, one remarkable mystery continues to puzzle historians. Where exactly was the true heart of Amurru? And how could such a significant kingdom disappear so completely that even its capital remains uncertain? Unlike civilizations remembered through towering ruins, Amurru survives mostly through scattered references preserved by others. Its own voice has almost vanished. That silence makes the kingdom one of archaeology's most fascinating historical puzzles. Ancient Syria formed one of the world's great crossroads. Caravans crossed its plains carrying copper, timber, textiles, ceramics, and luxury goods. Merchants traveled between Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean coast. Cities flourished because they stood along routes connecting entire civilizations. Political alliances changed frequently as neighboring powers competed for influence across this valuable region. Within this constantly shifting landscape, Amurru occupied an especially important position. It stood between larger kingdoms, whose ambitions often reached beyond their own borders. Because of its location, Amurru rarely existed in isolation. Its rulers needed diplomacy as much as military strength. Maintaining independence required careful negotiation. Relationships with neighboring states changed as regional politics evolved. Historical records confirm that Amurru participated actively within this international system. Its kings communicated with major powers. Its territory mattered. Its decisions influenced events extending far beyond its own frontiers. Yet despite this political importance, historians continue searching for one basic piece of information. Where was its capital? This question remains surprisingly difficult to answer. Normally, kingdoms of such significance leave behind administrative centers marked by monumental architecture, royal palaces, archives, and inscriptions. Amurru has resisted that expectation. Several archaeological sites have been proposed over the years. Each presents convincing evidence, each also leaves important questions unresolved. Some locations occupy ideal strategic positions. Others reveal impressive late Bronze Age occupation. Still others fit historical descriptions preserved within ancient correspondence. None has achieved universal acceptance as the definitive capital of Amurru. That uncertainty reflects the complexity of both archaeology and ancient political geography. Ancient kingdoms rarely resembled modern nation-states with precisely defined borders. Political authority often shifted over time. Regional capitals changed. Local rulers adapted to changing circumstances. The kingdom historians call Amurru may itself have evolved across generations. Its political center could have moved as alliances changed and new challenges emerged. Without definitive archaeological evidence, certainty remains impossible. Excavations throughout western Syria continue revealing remarkable Bronze Age settlements connected by trade and diplomacy. Stone buildings, defensive walls, storage facilities, workshops, and religious structures demonstrate highly organized communities. These discoveries illustrate the sophistication of societies living throughout the region. Amurru almost certainly shared these characteristics. Its leaders governed productive agricultural lands. Merchants likely carried goods through its territory every season. Officials administered taxation and local affairs. Families built homes, cultivated fields, and raised children within communities whose exact political identity sometimes remains difficult to reconstruct today. This human dimension often disappears behind discussions of kingdoms and diplomacy. Amurru was not simply a name appearing inside ancient correspondence. It was a living society. Farmers planted crops beneath changing seasons. Craftsmen shaped bronze and pottery. Religious ceremonies brought communities together. Markets filled with conversation. Ordinary people experienced daily life while kings negotiated international politics. Unfortunately, history preserved only fragments of their world. The kingdom's disappearance adds another layer to the mystery. The summary available to historians states that Amurru vanished from the historical record, leaving no clearly identified capital and little evidence explaining its final collapse. That wording is significant. It does not describe one dramatic destruction. Instead, it suggests a gradual fading from political memory. References become fewer. Administrative identity weakens. Eventually, the kingdom itself disappears. This quiet disappearance distinguishes Amurru from many better-known archaeological mysteries. Some civilizations leave behind spectacular destruction layers. Others preserve detailed accounts of military conquest. Amurru offers neither. Its political identity simply dissolves into historical silence. Responsible archaeology recognizes the limits of available evidence. Many explanations have been considered. Regional political transformation may have influenced the kingdom's future. Changing trade networks could have reshaped local economies. Larger neighboring powers may gradually have absorbed territories once governed independently. Each possibility reflects broader historical patterns observed elsewhere during the Late Bronze Age. None can currently be confirmed as the complete explanation. This careful approach reflects the strength of historical research rather than its weakness. Accepting uncertainty protects genuine understanding. Modern technology continues improving archaeological investigation across the region. Remote sensing identifies buried architectural remains. Satellite imagery reveals ancient settlement patterns invisible from the ground. Environmental reconstruction helps researchers understand how landscapes changed across thousands of years. Digital mapping compares archaeological discoveries with geographical clues preserved in ancient texts. Each new method contributes valuable information. Each also reminds historians that many discoveries still remain hidden beneath the earth. Perhaps one future excavation will uncover administrative archives identifying the Amurru's capital beyond question. Perhaps royal inscriptions still rest beneath unexplored settlement mounds. History has repeatedly shown that remarkable discoveries often emerge unexpectedly. Entire cities once considered legendary eventually reappeared through patient archaeological work. Amurru may yet reveal more of its story. Until then, the kingdom occupies a unique place within ancient history. It was important enough to influence international diplomacy, powerful enough to appear in official correspondence, strategically positioned between competing civilizations, yet mysterious enough that historians still debate where its political heart truly lay. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson Amuru offers. History is not preserved equally. Some civilizations leave monuments reaching toward the sky. Others leave only scattered words written by distant neighbors. Both shaped the ancient world. Both deserve to be remembered. Today, the hills and valleys of ancient Syria continue guarding countless archaeological sites still waiting to be explored. Beneath those landscapes may rest forgotten palaces, administrative buildings, or royal archives capable of transforming everything historians believe they know about Amuru. Until that day arrives, the kingdom remains one of the Bronze Age's quietest mysteries. A political power that once stood between empires, a kingdom that influenced the course of history, and a civilization whose greatest secret is not simply why it disappeared, but where the center of its forgotten world has been hidden all along. The forgotten copper smelters of Kirbat and Nahas, Jordan. Some of history's greatest mysteries were not built by kings. They were not created inside royal palaces or carved into the walls of magnificent temples. Instead, they were shaped by ordinary workers whose names were never recorded. Men and women who spent their lives producing the resources that allowed entire civilizations to flourish. They built economies. They supplied kingdoms. They powered trade across vast regions. Yet history forgot almost all of them. One remarkable archaeological site tells their story. Or perhaps more accurately, it tells the story they never had the opportunity to write themselves. Hidden within the rugged landscapes of southern Jordan lies Kirbat and Nahas, one of the most extraordinary industrial sites of the ancient world. At first glance, the surrounding landscape appears harsh and unforgiving. Rocky hills stretch toward the horizon. Sparse vegetation survives beneath an intense desert sun. Nothing immediately suggests that this quiet valley once supported an enormous industrial operation. Then archaeologists began excavating. What they uncovered changed everything. Massive slag heaps, ancient furnaces, copper smelting installations, industrial debris extending across a surprisingly large area. Together, these discoveries revealed something remarkable. Thousands of years ago, this isolated landscape supported large-scale copper production on a scale few researchers had expected. Yet despite the enormous effort required to operate such an industry, one mystery continues to remain unanswered. Who were the people responsible? Who organized this sophisticated production? And why has history preserved almost none of their identities? Unlike famous civilizations remembered through royal inscriptions and monumental architecture, the workers of Kirbat-in-Nahas remain almost completely anonymous. Their achievements survived, their names disappeared. Copper occupied a unique place in the ancient world. Long before iron became widespread, copper formed one of civilization's most valuable resources. Combined with tin, it produced bronze, transforming technology across entire regions. Weapons became stronger. Agricultural tools became more effective. Craftsmanship reached new levels of sophistication. Trade expanded. Entire economies depended upon reliable access to metal production. Without copper, the Bronze Age itself could never have existed. This simple fact explains why Kirbat-in-Nahas matters so much. It was not merely an isolated workshop. It formed part of a much larger economic system connecting distant kingdoms across the Near East. Every ingot produced here may have traveled hundreds of kilometers before reaching its final destination. Merchants transported metal across deserts. Caravans crossed mountain passes. Craftsmen transformed raw copper into objects used by farmers, soldiers, merchants, and rulers alike. The workers at Kirbat-in-Nahas rarely appear in written history. Their labor shaped history anyway. Archaeological excavation reveals the immense scale of that labor. Towering slag heaps remain one of the site's most striking features. These enormous accumulations represent centuries of industrial activity. Each layer reflects repeated cycles of mining, smelting, and metal production carried out over long periods. Unlike ordinary household refuse, industrial slag preserves evidence of organized manufacturing. Its sheer volume demonstrates sustained production rather than occasional activity. Someone planned this industry carefully. Someone coordinated resources. Someone organized labor. Yet the surviving archaeological evidence offers few direct clues regarding those responsible. Excavations have uncovered furnaces designed specifically for copper smelting, Stone structures supported industrial operations. Tools associated with metalworking reveal considerable technical knowledge. Producing copper required more than raw materials alone. Workers needed experience. Fuel had to be gathered. Ore required preparation. Temperatures had to be carefully controlled throughout the smelting process. This was skilled labor. Generations likely passed technical knowledge from experienced craftsmen to younger apprentices. Families may have lived near the production areas. Communities probably developed around this demanding industry. Children grew up surrounded by furnaces whose glow illuminated the desert after sunset. The archaeological record allows us to imagine these possibilities without claiming certainty beyond available evidence. That distinction remains essential. Responsible archaeology begins with physical discoveries. Interpretation follows cautiously. The summary preserved for Khirbet and Nahas emphasizes an important point. The massive industrial remains reveal a sophisticated workforce that supported regional economies. The workers themselves remain anonymous. That anonymity transforms the site into something profoundly human. History often celebrates rulers. Khirbet and Nahas reminds us that civilizations also depended upon ordinary specialists whose contributions rarely appeared inside royal records. Without them, trade would have weakened. Agriculture would have suffered. Military equipment would have become harder to produce. Economic systems would have struggled. Industrial workers formed an invisible foundation beneath political power. Archaeology finally gives them recognition, even when their names remain unknown. The surrounding environment makes their achievement even more impressive. Southern Jordan presents significant logistical challenges. Water remains limited. Resources require careful management. Operating large-scale copper production under such conditions demanded exceptional organization. Ore had to be extracted from nearby sources. Fuel had to be transported. Finished metal required movement toward distant markets. Every stage involved coordination. Nothing about this industry developed by accident. Modern scientific analysis has greatly expanded understanding of the site. Researchers examine slag composition to reconstruct ancient smelting techniques. Radiocarbon dating helps establish periods of activity. Environmental studies investigate how industrial production affected the surrounding landscape. Every new investigation adds another layer to the story, yet the central mystery remains remarkably consistent. Who exactly managed this enormous operation? Were independent communities responsible? Did regional authorities supervise production? How was labor organized? Current evidence supports continued research rather than definitive answers. This uncertainty reflects one of archaeology's greatest strengths. Ancient industrial sites rarely preserve detailed written explanations. Instead, they preserve physical evidence of human effort. Stone furnaces, metal residue, industrial waste. Together, these remains reconstruct an economy built through countless hours of skilled labor. The people themselves remain largely invisible. Ironically, their work outlasted the records that might have identified them. Walking through Khirbet-e-Nahas today, visitors encounter silent black slag heaps rising above the desert floor. To modern eyes, they resemble ordinary mounds of stone. Archaeologists see something entirely different. Each heap represents years of production, thousands of individual decisions, countless hours spent beside intense heat, entire communities organized around one of the ancient world's most valuable industries. The landscape itself became a monument to forgotten labor. Perhaps future discoveries will reveal nearby administrative buildings or inscriptions, identifying those responsible for managing the site. Perhaps unexplored areas still conceal settlements connected with the workers. History has repeatedly demonstrated that extraordinary discoveries often emerge where researchers least expect them. Until then, Khirbet and Nahas continues telling an extraordinary story without speaking a single name. It reminds us that civilizations were built not only by famous rulers, but also by anonymous craftsmen whose skill transformed raw stone into the metal that powered the ancient world. Their furnaces eventually grew cold. Their workshops fell silent. Their communities disappeared into history. Only the slag heaps remained, standing quietly beneath the Jordanian desert as lasting monuments to one of the greatest forgotten workforces the ancient world ever produced. The mystery of the burned palace at Tel Kabri. Some archaeological discoveries begin with magnificent architecture. Others begin with royal tombs or ancient inscriptions. The story of Tel Kabri begins with silence. Not the silence of an abandoned city weathered by time, but the silence left behind after one extraordinary building suddenly ceased to exist. For centuries, this palace stood as one of the most impressive centers of power in the ancient Levant. Its halls welcomed important visitors. Its storerooms held valuable goods. Its rulers governed a prosperous community connected to wider trade networks across the eastern Mediterranean. Then, almost without warning, everything changed. The palace was destroyed. Fire swept through its rooms. Its walls collapsed. Its corridors fell silent. Yet what happened afterward may be even more mysterious than the destruction itself. No clear evidence reveals who succeeded its rulers. No surviving records explain how political authority continued. The palace disappeared from history, leaving behind one enormous question: why did such an important center suddenly fall into silence? Located in what is now northern Israel, Tel Kabri occupied an advantageous position during the Bronze Age. The surrounding landscape supported agriculture, trade, and communication between neighboring regions. Communities flourished because fertile land and strategic routes created opportunities for prosperity. Within this environment, the palace became more than a royal residence. It functioned as the administrative and economic heart of the surrounding kingdom. From here, decisions influenced farms, trade, diplomacy, and local governance. Like many Bronze Age palaces, Tel Kabri almost certainly coordinated far more than ceremonial life. Officials managed resources. Craftsmen supplied luxury goods. Merchants arrived carrying products from distant regions. Storerooms preserved valuable commodities. Servants, administrators, guards, and laborers worked together to keep the palace functioning every day. It was a living institution rather than an isolated monument. Generations likely believed it would continue standing for centuries. Archaeology tells a different story. Excavations gradually revealed an impressive complex containing carefully planned rooms, courtyards, storage facilities, and richly decorated interiors. The palace reflected considerable wealth. Its architecture demonstrated skilled engineering. Imported materials suggested extensive commercial connections beyond the immediate region. Everything pointed toward an organized and prosperous political center. Then researchers encountered unmistakable evidence of destruction. Burned remains appeared throughout important sections of the palace. Collapsed walls buried rooms beneath layers of debris. The archaeological record clearly showed that a destructive fire marked the end of the building's active life. The fire itself is not the greatest mystery. Ancient buildings were vulnerable to many forms of destruction. Natural accidents, warfare, internal conflict, or structural failure could all contribute to catastrophic fires. The available evidence confirms destruction. It does not fully explain its cause. Responsible archaeology recognizes this distinction. The evidence supports careful observation rather than dramatic conclusions. What makes Tel Kabri especially intriguing is what followed. Or perhaps more accurately, what failed to follow. Ordinarily, major political centers continue their history even after periods of crisis. New rulers rebuild damaged structures. Administrative authority shifts to nearby locations. Written records document changing leadership. Successor governments leave behind new layers of occupation. At Tel Kabri, however, the historical trail becomes unexpectedly quiet. The summary available to historians emphasizes that the palace was suddenly destroyed, after which remarkable silence surrounds those who came next. The absence of clear successors transforms one destroyed building into a much larger historical puzzle. Who inherited authority? Where did political leadership move? Did nearby communities reorganize themselves elsewhere? Or did broader regional changes reshape the entire landscape? Current evidence cannot fully answer these questions. Walking through the palace during its final years would likely have revealed an extraordinary center of activity. Officials discussed administration within spacious halls. Servants carried supplies through busy corridors. Craftsmen maintained valuable furnishings. Visitors arrived seeking audiences with local rulers. Storerooms protected agricultural products collected from surrounding lands. Every room contributed to the daily rhythm of government. Then, in one decisive moment, preserved by archaeology, those routines ended. The fire froze part of that story beneath collapsed architecture. Thousands of years later, archaeologists carefully uncovered each layer. Rather than rushing toward dramatic conclusions, they documented every wall, floor, artifact, and burned beam with meticulous attention. Each discovery added another piece to the puzzle. Architectural remains revealed how the palace functioned. Household objects reflected everyday life. Imported materials demonstrated long-distance connections. Burned debris established the final destruction. Yet despite all this evidence, the identity of those who followed remains uncertain. This illustrates one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Physical remains often preserve events. They do not always preserve explanations. Fire leaves visible traces. Political transition often does not. Without surviving administrative records or later monumental construction, historians must accept uncertainty. Modern scientific techniques continue expanding understanding of Tel Kabri. Environmental studies reconstruct ancient landscapes surrounding the palace. Architectural analysis reveals construction methods and phases of expansion. Material studies identify imported goods arriving through regional trade. Careful excavation refines the chronology of destruction. Each investigation strengthens historical knowledge while respecting the limits of available evidence. The palace itself also reflects the remarkable sophistication of Bronze Age society. Its builders understood planning, engineering, storage, and administration. Its decoration demonstrated artistic achievement. Its organization reflected stable government capable of managing considerable resources. This was not an isolated residence built by chance. It represented an established political system supported by generations of experience. That system ultimately disappeared. Exactly how remains uncertain. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by Tel Kabri concerns the fragility of political memory. Buildings may survive for thousands of years. Institutions often do not. Once administrative traditions disappear and written records are lost, even prosperous kingdoms can fade into remarkable obscurity. The palace remains visible. The people who replaced its rulers do not. History sometimes preserves architecture more faithfully than government itself. That contrast gives Tel Kabri its enduring fascination. Visitors today see carefully excavated foundations, reconstructed walls, and archaeological remains stretching across the ancient landscape. Researchers see something more. They see one of the Bronze Age's most important political centers interrupted by an event whose consequences remain only partially understood. Every burned stone asks another question. Every collapsed room hints at decisions made during the palace's final hours. Yet the greatest mystery begins after the fire, not with destruction, but with silence. Perhaps future excavations will uncover nearby settlements connected with the palace's final administrators. Perhaps forgotten archives still rest beneath unexplored sections of the site. Perhaps one inscription waiting beneath centuries of earth will finally identify the rulers who inherited this remarkable kingdom. Until that day arrives, Tel Kabri remains one of archaeology's quietest mysteries. A magnificent palace consumed by fire, a prosperous center of power suddenly interrupted, and a royal residence whose greatest secret is not why it burned, but why history became almost completely silent once the flames were gone. The abandoned sanctuary of Mount Ebal. Not every ancient mystery begins with destruction. Some begin with absence. There are no shattered city walls, no signs of prolonged warfare, no evidence of a desperate final stand. Instead, archaeologists encounter something far more difficult to explain, a sacred place that was simply left behind. For generations, people climbed the slopes of Mount Ebal to gather at a carefully constructed sanctuary. Ritual architecture shaped the landscape. Stone-built installations reflected deliberate planning. Ceremonies almost certainly brought communities together at this remote hilltop. Then, one day, those gatherings stopped. The sanctuary remained. The people did not. Why would a place that had clearly held such importance suddenly be abandoned without obvious signs of violent struggle? That question continues to make Mount Ebal one of the ancient Near East's most intriguing archaeological mysteries. Located in the Central Highlands, Mount Ebal rises above the surrounding valleys, offering commanding views across the landscape. Even today, reaching the summit creates a sense of separation from everyday life. The climb itself encourages reflection. The higher one travels, the quieter the world becomes. It is not difficult to understand why ancient communities may have considered the mountain an appropriate place for ceremony. Elevated landscapes have often carried symbolic importance throughout human history. Mountains naturally draw attention. They dominate the horizon. They connect earth with sky. For many ancient societies, such locations became places where important communal rituals unfolded. Archaeological excavations at Mount Ebal revealed carefully arranged stone structures unlike ordinary domestic buildings. The construction demonstrates planning rather than accident. Walls were deliberately placed. Architectural features followed recognizable patterns. Nothing about the site suggests a temporary campsite or casual occupation. Instead, researchers identified a location specifically designed for ritual use. The sanctuary reflects intention. Its builders understood exactly what they wanted to create. Unfortunately, they left no written explanation describing its purpose. This silence defines the mystery. Unlike temples belonging to civilizations that preserved extensive religious texts, Mount Ebal offers architecture without accompanying written interpretation. The stones remain. The ceremonies do not. Modern archaeologists therefore rely entirely upon physical evidence. Every stone, every layer of soil, every recovered artifact contributes another clue. Yet even together, they cannot fully recreate the beliefs that once animated the sanctuary. The site appears to have served communities over an extended period. People returned repeatedly. Construction remained organized. Activity followed recognizable patterns. This was not an isolated event, but an established tradition maintained across generations. Families may have traveled together toward the mountain. Seasonal gatherings could have brought neighboring communities into one shared ceremonial landscape. Offerings may have accompanied important rituals. Leaders likely guided proceedings understood by everyone present. Children would have grown up watching ceremonies whose meanings required no explanation because they formed part of everyday cultural life. Today, those meanings are gone. Only the setting remains. One of the most remarkable aspects of Mount Ebal is what archaeologists did not discover. The available evidence provides no clear indication of violent destruction ending the sanctuary's use. There are no overwhelming signs of military conquest preserved within the site's archaeological record. The summary describing Mount Ebal emphasizes something unusually quiet. The sanctuary was abandoned without evidence of violent struggle. That observation immediately raises further questions. If conflict did not force abandonment, what did? Communities sometimes relocate for many reasons. Trade routes change. Population patterns evolve. Political authority shifts. Religious traditions transform over generations. Environmental conditions influence settlement. Any combination of these factors could gradually alter how sacred places were used. At Mount Ebal, however, the available evidence does not identify one definitive explanation. The sanctuary simply falls silent. This gradual silence makes the site emotionally powerful. Imagine arriving after generations of continuous ceremony only to find no gathering waiting. The pathways remain. The stone structures still stand. The surrounding mountains appear unchanged, yet the voices have disappeared. No smoke rises from ritual activity. No pilgrims climb the hillside. The sacred place remains physically intact while its purpose fades into memory. Archaeology often reveals this contrast between permanence and change. Stones survive. Tradition does not always survive alongside it. Excavation at Mount Ebal required extraordinary attention to detail. Researchers documented every architectural feature carefully. Construction methods helped distinguish ritual structures from ordinary buildings. Artifact distribution provided additional evidence regarding how different parts of the sanctuary may have functioned. Environmental studies examined the surrounding landscape to understand why this particular location had been selected. Each investigation strengthened understanding of the site's physical history. None restored the beliefs of its builders. That limitation reflects one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Material evidence can reconstruct places with remarkable accuracy. Reconstructing thought is considerably more difficult. Modern scientific techniques continue improving research at sites like Mount Ebal. Digital mapping records architectural relationships with extraordinary precision. Geophysical surveys identify buried features without immediate excavation. Environmental reconstruction helps researchers visualize ancient vegetation, climate, and movement across the surrounding landscape. These methods provide increasingly sophisticated insights into how communities interacted with sacred places. Even with these advances, the central mystery remains remarkably consistent. Why did people stop coming? The sanctuary clearly mattered. Its builders invested time, labor, and planning into its construction. Communities maintained its use over extended periods. Then those traditions ended. No surviving written account explains the decision. No inscription records a final ceremony. History simply observes the silence that followed. Perhaps future excavations in the surrounding region will identify settlements connected with the sanctuary. Perhaps new discoveries will reveal broader cultural changes influencing religious practice. Perhaps additional archaeological evidence will explain why one sacred landscape gradually lost its place within community life. Until then, Mount Ebal remains an extraordinary reminder that history does not always end dramatically. Sometimes traditions disappear quietly. Sometimes sacred places are left behind without destruction. Sometimes the greatest mysteries emerge not from catastrophe, but from ordinary decisions whose reasons have been forgotten. Today, visitors standing among the ancient stone structures encounter the same mountain that ancient worshippers once climbed thousands of years ago. The wind still moves across the summit. The valleys still stretch toward the horizon. The carefully arranged stones remain where they were first placed. Everything appears almost unchanged. Except for one thing. The people who gave those stones meaning never returned. And with their departure, they carried away the only explanation that could have told us why one of the ancient world's most remarkable sanctuaries was quietly abandoned, leaving behind nothing but silence, stone, and one unanswered question that continues to echo across the mountain even today: the silent collapse of the kingdom of Quek, Cilicia. Some kingdoms vanish in spectacular fashion. Their capitals are reduced to ruins. Their rulers leave behind desperate final inscriptions. Their downfall echoes across generations through stories of dramatic battles and unforgettable disasters. The kingdom of Quek tells a very different story. Its ending was not marked by one decisive moment. There was no single event that erased it from history overnight. Instead, the kingdom slowly faded from the political landscape until, almost without anyone noticing, it ceased to exist as an independent power. That quiet disappearance makes Quek one of the ancient world's most remarkable historical mysteries. Located in the fertile plains of Cilicia, along the southeastern coast of modern Turkey, Quek occupied one of the most strategically valuable regions of the ancient Near East. Mountains protected its northern frontier. The Mediterranean Sea opened routes toward distant kingdoms. Rivers nourished fertile farmland capable of supporting prosperous communities. Trade caravans crossed its territory carrying valuable goods between Anatolia, Syria, and the wider Mediterranean world. Everything about its geography favored growth. For centuries, the kingdom benefited from this extraordinary position. Its rulers governed productive agricultural lands. Merchants passed through thriving settlements. Regional diplomacy connected Quek with neighboring powers whose fortunes constantly shifted. The kingdom was never isolated. Its future depended upon maintaining relationships with larger states surrounding it. That balance proved increasingly difficult as the political landscape changed. Unlike massive empires capable of dominating entire regions, smaller kingdoms often survived through diplomacy. Military strength remained important. Careful negotiation mattered even more. The rulers of Quek almost certainly understood this reality. Every alliance required calculation. Every political decision carried consequences. Maintaining independence demanded flexibility as neighboring powers expanded their influence. Historical records indicate that Quek successfully navigated this challenging environment for generations. Its government functioned. Its economy remained productive. Its settlements continued supporting everyday life. Families cultivated fertile fields. Craftsmen produced pottery, metalwork, and tools. Merchants loaded caravans with goods destined for distant markets. Religious ceremonies marked the changing seasons. Children grew up believing their kingdom would continue much as it always had. Then, history began changing around them. The Neo-Assyrian Empire expanded steadily across the Near East. Its political influence reached farther each generation. Many neighboring kingdoms faced difficult choices. Some resisted, others negotiated. Many gradually became incorporated into larger imperial systems. Quek appears to have followed this quieter path. The summary preserved by historians describes something profoundly different from sudden destruction. Rather than ending through catastrophic collapse, the kingdom experienced gradual political assimilation into the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Its independent identities slowly dissolved. This distinction matters enormously. History often focuses upon dramatic endings because they leave visible evidence. Gradual transformation is much harder to recognize. Cities continue functioning. Communities remain occupied. Agriculture continues. Trade survives. Life goes on. Only political authority changes. For archaeology, this creates a fascinating challenge. Material culture often continues across periods of political transition. Buildings remain standing. Roads continue carrying merchants. Markets still operate. People adapt rather than disappear. The kingdom changes without the landscape necessarily reflecting immediate catastrophe. This quiet process explains why Key remains so intriguing. Its collapse cannot easily be identified through one destruction layer or abandoned capital. Instead, historians reconstruct the process through careful study of political history and archaeological evidence. Every inscription, every settlement, every administrative change contributes another clue. Together they reveal a kingdom gradually becoming part of something larger. Walking through Key during this period would likely have revealed surprisingly ordinary scenes. Farmers harvested crops beneath familiar skies. Merchants negotiated prices inside busy marketplaces. Craftsmen continue producing goods using techniques refined over generations. Officials managed local affairs. Children played in streets where their parents had once played. To ordinary families, daily life may not have changed dramatically overnight. Political transformation often unfolds slowly. Generations adapt without fully recognizing the historical significance of the changes surrounding them. This human perspective is essential. Kingdoms are not abstract political entities. They are communities. Every historical transition affects ordinary lives far more than royal titles alone. When Cree gradually lost its independent identity, the people themselves remained. Their traditions evolved. Their communities adapted. History continued moving forward. Only the kingdom's separate political voice gradually disappeared. Responsible archaeology approaches this process with great care. The available evidence supports gradual assimilation rather than dramatic conquest. That conclusion reflects surviving historical records while respecting the complexity of political change. Ancient societies rarely fit simple narratives of victory and defeat. More often, history unfolds through negotiation, adaptation, and administrative transformation. Quay represents exactly that kind of historical evolution. Modern archaeological research continues improving understanding of the region. Excavations uncover settlements reflecting long-term occupation across changing political periods. Architectural remains demonstrate continuity rather than abrupt abandonment. Material culture reveals communities adapting to new administrative realities while preserving many aspects of everyday life. These discoveries reinforce the idea that history often changes quietly. The disappearance of a kingdom does not necessarily mean the disappearance of its people. One of the most remarkable lessons offered by Key concerns the nature of historical memory itself. Political identities are surprisingly fragile. A kingdom may exist for centuries. Its rulers may negotiate with powerful neighbors. Its economy may prosper. Its territory may influence regional affairs. Yet once independent administration disappears, later generations often remember only the larger empire that followed. The smaller kingdom gradually fades into the background. Its achievements become absorbed into broader historical narratives. Key experienced exactly this process. Its independent story slowly merged into the expanding world of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Today, archaeologists continue studying the landscapes once governed by Quay. Ancient settlements still emerge beneath layers of soil. Fragments of pottery continue revealing everyday life. Stone foundations preserve traces of forgotten communities. Each discovery reminds researchers that political history is only one part of the human story. Behind every kingdom stood countless individuals whose lives continued regardless of changing governments. Perhaps future excavations will uncover additional inscriptions identifying local rulers with greater clarity. Perhaps administrative centers connected with the kingdom still remain buried beneath unexplored archaeological sites. History has repeatedly demonstrated that forgotten civilizations often reveal themselves one discovery at a time. Until then, K remains one of the ancient world's most quietly fascinating mysteries. not because it ended in spectacular destruction, but because it almost disappeared without anyone witnessing a final moment. Its fields remained fertile, its towns continued living, its people adapted to a changing world, only its independence slowly faded into history. And in that quiet transformation, the kingdom of Quebec reminds us that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not found in sudden catastrophes, but in the silent moments when an entire civilization gradually becomes part of something larger, leaving behind only faint echoes of the kingdom it once was.